this. It's been on my mind to do it for a while. We'll do it quickly now. So this is the documents question. Um, Critical analysis of sources mind map. Don't forget you are going to be expected to look at a document which will be on, very likely, either the Apprentice Boys of Derry or the Sunningdale Agreement. Sorry, there's an aircraft going overhead. Possibly Coleraine, but that was last year, so that's unlikely. But regardless of what document comes up, you're going to be asked to make a critical analysis of the document as a valuable source. That's the part of the question that most students will struggle with. Part one is just what's in the document, pretty easy. Part two is comparing the evidence in the documents, which is most people wouldn't have too much trouble with. And part four is the bit that you better know your stuff. So that'll be asking you to write your account of whatever it is, Sunningdale or the Coleraine or the Apprentice Boys, and that's where the mind maps and the videos on those documents will come in handy. But the middle one here, the critical analysis, is the one that a lot of you struggle with. So I'll go through this really quickly, and I'll give this to you, a physical copy of it tomorrow in class, okay, or in school tomorrow. So first thing is, the marking scheme says that candidates may offer positive and or negative views on the value of the historical source material. Now, I think it's important that you do offer some positive and some negative views on the source, because that shows a balanced approach, and I think that's what we're looking for. The vast majority of the documents that are put on the exam for analysis are first-hand sources. So that's primary sources. The marking scheme sometimes uses the phrase contemporaneous, which means from the time when the event took place. So, in other words, primary. There might be eyewitness accounts, there might be autobiographies, there might be, newspaper reports. There's a whole kind of, slew of different types of sources, but essentially they're most likely to be first-hand sources, okay? Now, when you're analysing a first-hand source, there's certain things you can say to look and say, look, this is why I think this is a good source. So here are some of them. They allow us to get a personal reaction of an individual to events of public importance. So if you're reading something and it's a nationalist's description of what it's like to have the Apprentice Boys march down their street in the Bogside, well, that's a really, really valuable source, because it's a first-hand personal reaction to that event, which we are studying years later, and it gives us an insight into why that event became something important. The phrase "a ground-up view of events" is one that you see in marking schemes. Again, ground-up view. In other words, you're not looking at it from some politician's point of view or some reporter's point of view or some historian's point of view. You're looking at it from the perspective of an individual who was there at the time, and that is of value. It offers us a unique perspective into familiar events. So we can learn about, Sunningdale, and we can learn about the Vanguard. But if we read a document where a member of Vanguard was interviewed and gives their experience of why they went out and took part in those blockades and why they were opposed to Sunningdale, that's very, very valuable. And also it can create some empathy between you as a reader and that person who features in the source. Even if your view of historical events differ from theirs, it humanizes them, and it makes the historical event being studied more vivid, more real, more meaningful through that source. The source might be good at conveying emotions as well as factual matters. Again, that gives it a deepened, more human sense of what it was like to be there at the time and to experience whatever they're describing. And sometimes the sources are written by, especially if it's an autobiography, written by somebody who was there at the time, but maybe is writing about it years later. So that facilitates reflection, and it shows how attitudes can change over time or harden over time. It shows how people can look at events they were involved in and learn from them. It shows how, for example, if you were somebody who was involved, like David Trimble, who was involved in the in Vanguard and was vehemently opposed to the Sunningdale Agreement, why then did he go on and advocate and sign the Good Friday Agreement in 1997? So that's the kind of useful commentary you can make about, the commentary you can make about why these kinds of sources are useful. But you can also talk about why they're, problematic. obviously, if it's one individual's account of events, it's a narrow, limited perspective. That means that there's not that global view of events. You're not looking at it from, everybody's point of view, from a number of different points of view, so you get a full picture. So that's the absence of the global perspective can result in a skewed version of events. That's a really good little phrase to use. Skewed means, not accurate, inaccurate. The writer may be consciously biased. They may be somebody with an agenda. They may be somebody who was a member of the IRA and has a hatred for Sunningdale. They may be somebody who was a member of the Apprentice Boys and has a love for the organisation. That's bias. Now, there might be unconscious bias too. In other words, not deliberate, but it could be there just by being part of a particular community or maybe being a victim of an injustice. So that is one of the things that can be problematic with first-hand sources. That there again, these are all phrases you can use, that the source fails to display objectivity, fails to give a fair account of events, fails to take all sides into consideration, is one-sided or personal. So that's the kind of negative commentary that you can bring in. Have that stuff ready, and you're going to be able to employ the positive commentary or negative commentary on whatever critical analysis, the critical analysis of whatever sources you're looking at. Don't forget as well to look at the language employed in the piece. Is the piece very emotive? Or is it measured and objective? That's something that will influence the strength or the quality of the source. Does the piece include any description, like any aesthetic language, any vivid accounts that make the reality of the events being remembered or recounted or being described more vivid for a historian who is looking at the event or the historical matter? Is the language readable? Is it accessible? Is it easy to understand? Or is it complicated, abstract, and difficult to understand? That's something that adds value or takes away from the value of a source. Is the source filled with jargon, kind of technical language that if you don't know it, you can't interpret it, you can't understand it? So is it easy to read? That's a strength. If it's difficult to read, that's a weakness. And sometimes, if it's a first-person account, you might get really kind of straightforward and direct voice, which might give you an insight into the type of person. If it's an important historical person, it might give you an insight into the type of person that they were. So the tone being employed, we'll come to the tone again in a few minutes, might be something to consider. Finally, there are 4 other things to consider. Number 1, if it's a witness account, does that witness contain or possess some sort of expertise? Are they a lawyer? Are they some sort of like a sociologist who studied, communities and how communities interact with each other? Does that expertise then help us as readers, as students of the period, understand the account or understand the event being described in the proper context? So that's something to look out for. Are there little facts, little details that maybe you didn't know, that the first-hand account, the biography, the autobiography, the witness statement, the primary source, the contemporaneous evidence contains that? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, that's really interesting. That adds to my understanding of the event. That adds to my understanding of the piece, and that lends weight to the source. So that's a really good thing you can say. Then the tone. Is it, like, if it's a newspaper report, it's very likely to be kind of detached and factual and measured, maybe thoughtful and reflective. But if it's like written from the point of view of somebody who was like really heavily involved in the conflict that's under discussion or the issue, there might be a lot of bias in there, but also could be condescending or dismissive of other people's opinions. So where there is bias, that's a weak source. Now again, it's good to read sources from all different perspectives. That's why primary sources are important, but these are things that you can take into account. Finally then, is the source an edited extract? So does it say at the top, this is an edited extract from blah blah blah? Because if it is an edited extract, then you've got to suspect, have they just picked out a part of the book, a part of the document that fits with a particular view on the event? So if it is an edited extract and you're looking to do some critical analysis, say that because it is edited, important contextual or balancing points may have been lost, and that dilutes or reduces or diminishes the value of the source. Finally then, don't forget, when you're comparing, use that comparative lexicon that you learned for paper 2 in English, your comparative phraseology. Talk about both documents, contain important information, or one document is biased, and this is similarly the case in the other document, whereas document A is quite balanced, document B takes a more hectoring tone, document A has lots of evidence of engagement, whereas document B is much more detached. There's loads of different things you can say. Okay, so that's that mind map, and that's how you comment on primary source documents. I hope you find that useful, and I'll give you the document tomorrow morning. Cheers.